asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Let's start off with a bit of Brexit. Stop! Don't groan. Don't whinge. Don't complain. Shut your cake hole and stay there. I say that in jest, of course. I know it's driving people up the wazoo. But we've got to talk about it. I'm trying not to talk about it too much. And I'm trying to inject a little bit of humour as best as I can, though there's nothing funny about it. I got an email today from somebody who's been listening to me for too long. From a woman who listens to the programme in Sri Lanka. This is true. And she asked me in the email to explain this backstop bollocks. And those were her words. That's the term, monumental bollocks, now introduced into the lexicon of Sri Lankans. What's this backstop bollocks, Richie? The EU. Because the media seem to be making a complete Lee-Rody of explaining it. Lee-Rody is the Irish word for balls. The media is making a balls of explaining it in a way that you can understand it. Not you, but some people. So what is the customs backstop issue? Right, well, we voted to leave the European Union. Not that that matters, really, anymore. That included leaving the customs union, of course. What is the customs union? Well, it allows one country within the EU to trade with another without any border checks or without any taxes, any tariffs. So, the government, that's the UK government, and EU negotiators like Michel Barnier, they haven't yet agreed how this will all work after the UK leaves the European Union. They haven't agreed on how trade in goods will continue. But they said that a backstop option is necessary just in case there is a no deal. Or the technology is not ready in time to avoid the return of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Now, this is absolute monumental bollocks. This hard border shite. This is an invention. This is the figment of the imaginations of those who want to thwart the will of the people. So, what did the UK say? Well, weeks and weeks and weeks ago, the UK said that they thoroughly rejected the European Union's plan to deal with all of this, because the EU said, well, let's just keep Northern Ireland, that's Northern Ireland, in the customs union. But the UK said, no, piss off, because that would create a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Right, so what did the UK propose? Well, the UK proposed a backup plan, which would mean that the whole of the UK would basically stay in the customs union after December 2020, which is when the 21-month transition period ends. But a lot of people didn't like that. Brexiteers were none too happy. Why should we keep the whole of the UK in the customs union after the transition period for an indeterminate or an indefinite period of time? Why should we do that? That's tantamount to staying in. Right? Right. So David Davis, the Brexit secretary, he lost his shit and said, no, not having that. Jacob Rees-Mogg, terminological inexactitude, darling, lost his shit. Others lost their collective excrement. They didn't like it. So Davis was furious and he demanded that if there is to be some sort of alignment after the transition period, there has to be an end date in it. So the end date has been put in the government's proposed backstop plan, and the end date will be the end of 2021. Right? I can't make it any simpler than that. So, if the European Union goes for this, and they won't because they're a shower of bastards, it means that the UK won't be leaving the European Union for, Well, until at least 2021. That'll be December 31st, 2021. My birthday. It ain't happening. Do you get the picture? Conservative MP Peter Bone is absolutely doolally about this. He has lost, like a lot of pro-Brexit, pro-Leave people, he's properly furious. This is Peter Bone, MP, speaking with Sky News today. Have a listen.
No, it's not binding. You make a very good point. It was interesting, the Labour Party's position now is they want to stay in the EU, and not only do they want to stay in by virtue of what they're proposing, but they now want a second referendum on it. That's amazing. Labour's split down the middle. But in relation to this backstop thing, it's totally unnecessary. And in my view, we need to have someone who's driving the Brexit policy who absolutely believes in it. And that's the only chance. But I think we've probably got the time now.
To go, Peter.
Probably we've got to a stage now where we say a deal on world trade rules is much better than anything we could possibly get. And it may be the time just to say, we're not negotiating with you anymore, EU. You've been an impossible organisation to negotiate with. We're going to come out at the end of March next year, save £39 billion, regain our own fishing rights, have our own immigration policy, make our own trade deals, and make our own laws in our own country, judged by our own judges. That's what the people voted for in the referendum. And why is it so many politicians now are trying to stop that happening?
Because they are beholden to Rothschild Zionist agents operating in this country. There's no such thing as democracy. Your politicians do not work for you. They never have done. Ever. Look at Jezza Corbyn, wrote about him today. Ambrose Evans Pritchard had a fantastic piece in the Telegraph newspaper today about how it's over. But we've been saying that it's over for a long time. This is like the cockroach lying on its back that can't right itself, kicking its legs in the air. Brexit is dead. It was never alive to begin with. What do you have waiting in the wings? You have Jezza the liar, Corbyn the con man. We want to stay in the single market and the customs union. Which is what he's saying now. Months ago, he was saying, no, we've got to abide by the will of the people and we have to leave the single market. We should stay in some sort of customs union, but we have to leave the single market. Now he's saying we should stay in the single market, and he won't rule out putting forward another referendum should Labour win the next election. This is a man who spent all his life railing against the tyranny of the fascist dictatorship EU. So you have no choice, effectively. There is none. UKIP are gone, destroyed, finished, and in their wake, nothing. Right? Right. That's the way it is. Peter Bone there today. Vladimir Putin had his annual phone-in today. Now, state television broadcasts this. It's an interesting thing to a point. Putin goes on telly and people can phone in and ask him questions about the state of the country, about his policies and about plans that he has for the future and all the rest of it. Sky's Moscow correspondent Diana Magne was there to observe this, and she sent this report back to Sky, and she basically talks here about the things that Putin said today in this phone-in show. Pretty biased. Have a listen. This is Diana Magne, Sky News.
This is his annual direct call session. It's called a Q&A session, where essentially he allows people to call up and have their say, make people feel that they have some kind of involvement in the political process. And I think one pensioner put it very well, saying, why is it that the only way I can get answers to my problems is by calling your Q&A session? And he did cover a lot of ground, talking about relations with the West, saying that sanctions and containment strategies are counterproductive, that, as you say, the US has upset strategic balance, and that people need to sit down and work together to try and establish a European security architecture, which he clearly seems to want to be a part of. He did refer to the Skripals, but essentially saying what he said before on that case, that if this had been a military-grade nerve agent, then plenty more people would have died. This is something he's said over and over again, and that he wants to have a part of the investigation and for Russia to have access to the investigation. In regards Syria and Ukraine, he also made comments. He said twice before that Russia would pull out its troops from Syria. Now he says that troops will stay there as long as it is in Russia's interests. And he warned Ukraine not to stage any kind of provocations, he said, or military uptick in the Donbass region during the World Cup. So quite a lot of ground covered. One more quite interesting thing that I think will interest English viewers is comments on Roman Abramovich. He said that essentially Russian businessmen were being persecuted abroad and encouraged Russia's billionaires to bring their money back home. And one last thing I'd like to point out, he said that he was asked at one stage, how do you feel, or what was the one piece of advice that your father gave to you? And without missing a beat, he went, do not lie. Now, I think that there are plenty in the West who would look at the Kremlin's record on, for example, whether there were Russian troops in Crimea, whether there was Russian involvement in MH17, whether there was Russian election interference in the 2016 US election, etc., as suggesting perhaps the Kremlin per se has not taken Mr. Putin's senior advice on board.
Yeah, typical Rupert Murdoch journalist report there. Load of nonsense. There's no proof. There isn't a shred of evidence that the Russian government has tried to interfere in the general elections of Europe, in the referendum here in 2016 or in the US election. No proof has been offered, ever. And there's no proof, not even a whiff of it, that the FDB, on the orders of the Kremlin, had anything to do with the attempt on the life of Sergei Skripal and his daughter. Even if you believe that somebody attempted to kill Sergei Skripal and Yulia Skripal, because all the evidence points to the opposite being true, that nobody's attempted to kill them, right? Bizarre stuff. I suppose Bashar al-Assad would have watched that phone-in with interest, and he would have been happy to hear the Russian president reaffirm Russia's commitment to staying the course in Syria and offering the Syrian government the support it needs in its efforts to rid the country of the Western-backed, head-chopping lunatics that are on the run in that country. Good stuff. Here's one that'll make you laugh. 17 and a half minutes past the hour. The Richie Allen Show for Thursday. This will make you giggle. Fair play to Polly Boyko, RT reporter. Like Polly a lot. Very good reporter. Peers in the House of Lords have been told to stop sleeping on the job and refrain even from sedentary shouting, along with other transgressions that have been observed in recent months, according to a memo from the Chief Whip. Lord Taylor of Holbeach warned Tory peers in an email that no more bad behaviour would be tolerated, claiming, quote, it has been observed by members of our House that over recent months, conduct in the chamber has not been of the standard we should expect, end quote. And a list of primary misdemeanours committed by Tory peers was included in this memo, including things like audible conversations, shouting, as well as the common offence of falling asleep in the chamber. Right. Yes. This is unelected fuckers who seek to subvert the referendum result. These are the people who defeated the withdrawal bill, the EU withdrawal bill, on 15 different aspects of it, and who will continue to try and do that next week. These unelected, appointed bastards who get £300 a day to do what? I'll tell you to do what. To get pissed in the many bars that festoon the halls of Westminster. They get pissed and then they waddle into the chamber and they snore and fart their way through the afternoon until they get a text message from Jeeves, and Jeeves tells them that the Rolls Royce is outside the front door. They then struggle to their feet, waddle to the Rolls Royce, fuck off to do God knows what, and then they return the following day to fart and snore their way through the day again, in between getting pissed, subverting a bit of democracy here and there, and then going back to the car where Jeeves will take them home again. And the beat goes on. Don't you just love democracy? Now, Vivienne Westwood is a fashion impresario. You know Vivienne Westwood, outspoken fashionista. She's going to break Julian Assange out of the Ecuadorian embassy. That's what she said anyway when speaking to Ortiz Going Underground. She might have had a few sherbets in her herself. Right. This is Vivienne Westwood speaking to Afshin Rattanzi, I think that's his name, who presents Going Underground. She's going to break out Assange.
I've come up with the term that is really flouting public justice throughout the world, and it's called misrule of law. And it's the British government who practice misrule of law. They have no legal reason whatsoever to keep him there. There's nothing that he's done that they can keep him there with. They keep inventing things just for the sake of keeping him there. Why? This is all to do with America, because I think Britain would actually like to say to Julian, OK, you can step outside that door. We have nothing to arrest you for. Please, you can go. But if they do that, then they've got the trouble that America want him extradited, and they don't want to deal with that. You know, they don't want to say, oh, America, you're our best friend, but we don't want to extradite him. Do you mind? No, they don't want to do that. They don't want to be in that position. You know, so I think that's what's going on. And I'm going to get him out of there with this misrule of law. I fought the law means I fought misrule of law. And I fought the law, and I helped get Julian Assange out of there. I'm going to give free T-shirts away. I'm going to get a pop group to start singing I fought the law. They already did. You know, public opinion's got to be against misrule of law.
Go on, Vivienne. She's had a few sherbets. Somebody nominate her for a peerage. She'll fit right in.